Welcome to our video series on how to build a form in ClickUp. Before watching this video, it's helpful to review our other resources related to form design best practices and designing your forms with data in mind. For now, we will focus on, first, how to navigate to create a new form, how to configure an example form using various elements like sections, enriched text, date questions, multiple choice questions, matrix questions, open response questions, and finally, numeric questions. And lastly, we will discuss how to publish and view your form and what to know before you publish. All right, let's dig in. Before we start building out our form within ClickUp, let's go ahead and start with the end in mind. I want to show you a fully built out form, and then we're going to back up and I'll show you how to build a form like this using our form builder. You'll notice that my example of a walkthrough form has collapsible sections that contain different question types. You have multiple choice questions, look-fors on a scale. These are called matrix questions, and some open-ended questions. Let me start from the beginning so you can envision how to build your own form. Whether you're building a walkthrough form or a coaching log or any other form, the form builder will work the same way. To get started from your homepage, click the View All next to your walkthrough section, or navigate to the walkthroughs page from anywhere in the app using the left-hand menu. Again, I'm showing you the walkthrough example, but if you're creating a coaching log, you just click Coaching. So after pressing View All, you will then see all of the walkthrough instances in your organization. If you're editing an existing instance, simply click on the three-dot menu next to the instance that you want to edit, and then you're just going to click Edit. If you're starting a new instance, you're just going to be selecting that new walkthrough button to the top right. Note that creating forms in ClickUp requires a special permission. So if you don't see these editing options, please let your administrator or client success manager know. You'll notice the form builder has 6 different form element options that we'll go through together. Let's pull up the contents of our example walkthrough form in Google Docs so that way we can build out this form. It has a section with background information up top, then 3 sections for look-fors related to learning targets, classroom environment, instruction, and then a summary section at the end with space for summarized comments. Let's start with our first section. A section is just a container that organizes items in an easy to navigate, collapsible way. Let's go ahead and add the name background information, select an icon, and then let's go ahead and make it collapsible to get that nice clean view that we saw at the beginning of this video. We'll click Save, and then I can add another section below by clicking the outermost part of the section and then pressing the plus sign. Or I can just add items within this section as well. Within that section, I'm going to click on the rich text option to paste in my simple instructions. Note that you can add a link in a rich text box as well if you ever need to. So I'm going to go ahead and add rich text. And from my example walkthrough, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste these instructions right here in the rich text editor. You'll notice now that you can see the rich text right here in that first section. Note that the form builder is a drag and drop, so I can also drag these instructions above the section of the next section as well. You can also always see the table of contents, really the outline to the right of your screen, which makes it easier to navigate as your form becomes more complex. You'll also notice that when clicking any element, you have the option to edit, delete, and clone any item. Next, I'll add the date field to my form. This allows users to backdate a submission if needed. I'll need to fill in the prompt, these 2 settings, and what's called a data label. For now, I'm going to write date in the prompt and data label field, and I'll explain what these concepts are in just a minute. I'll select yes, that this is going to be required. I will also want to use the date entered as the primary date for the submission. You'll want to select yes to both of these options in most cases. This simply means that it will treat the date entered as the date of the submission. To keep building out my form, I'm going to add the other question in my background info section, the multiple choice question asking observers to select the subject area observed. I'm going to click on the blue plus sign and select multiple choice. And I'll see a few fields that I'll need to fill in. As you create these elements, you'll see three common concepts. First, a prompt. This is exactly the language the user will see on the form. Two, whether the item is required. And three, what's called a data label. Unlike the prompt, a data label is not visible on the form, but will surface later if you decide to build reports for sharing data. You can think of a data label as a short name, but keep in mind that it must be unique. You cannot have two different multiple choice questions, for example, both with the same data label, subject observe. I will use the space at the bottom to paste in the subject area options. Lastly, I'll decide whether I want to allow users to select multiple options in this multiple choice. This is an important decision to make because it has data implications and it's difficult to change once you've begun collecting data. If you haven't already, I recommend reviewing our other resources related to form design best practices and designing your own form with data in mind. So now that I've finished creating my multiple choice question, I'm going to save. And you'll see your multiple choice question within your form. Let's add the next section of questions related to learning targets. For this, I'm going to go ahead and use a matrix questions. Then I can add these look-fors in what we call a matrix question, or a set of items on a scale. Just like the others, I'll need to fill in the prompt, the requirement and data label. Again, you want to make sure your data label or the short name for this set of questions is unique. Next, I'll load in the individual look-fors observers will be able to see. I can drag and reorder these. I can also delete them using the trash can. The scale, in this case, I'm using a 3-point scale, going from not evident to fully evident. You might have anywhere from 2 to 10 options on your own scale, but keep in mind that you will not be able to change the number of options on your scale once you publish the form. It's also important to note that the scale should always go from least ideal to most ideal. This is important because once you start to view your data, a matrix question visualizes something we like to call a heat map. This is an example of a heat map, where each value on the scale is associated with a numerical value. This makes it very easy to look at trends at a glance. You can find more information about heat maps in our prerequisite videos on designing forms with the data in mind. Lastly, as I'm setting up a matrix question, I can optionally include an NA item on the scale so that users have an option to select this if they do not observe all the items in this matrix, and the data simply would not be counted. You'll notice my form has a few spaces for open response boxes, one in each section, and then a summarized feedback section at the end. On my form, I'll go ahead and click Add, and then Open Response. I can, as always, fill in the prompt, whether it's required, and the data label. Again, a prompt is the language the user will see on the form, and the data label is a unique short name that is not visible on the form. I have completed my first section of my walkthrough form. Note that there is one question that we have not covered because it's not found in my walkthrough form, and that's a numeric question. This is an item that is commonly used on a coaching log, for example, to capture the total number of hours spent. It simply accepts numeric inputs and will result in a visual that totals the numeric inputs entered in the form submissions. An example for how you can see a numeric entry is provided here on the number of hours spent in coaching. The setup for this element is very straightforward, just the standard 3 fields you always see. Now that we've discussed each of the form elements, we'll talk about publishing your form and what to think about before you click publish. Now that I've filled out my form, I'm almost ready to publish the form. Before you do this, you'll want to review a few things that will be a little bit more tricky to change once you hit publish. We encourage you to reach out to your CSM for feedback before publishing. One thing you will not be able to do once published is switch the multi-select setting, which determines whether a user is able to choose more than one option. If you need to make this change once you've published, you will need to clone this field. You do that by selecting Copy. You'll want to rename the data label, delete the old field, and publish. This is a safeguard in place for data integrity purposes. Even if you've published and start using the form, you can always add new options to your multiple choice question by editing and clicking Add. You can also drag the order of the options or rename. Just be careful not to rename to a totally different concept in the same row if you've already captured data. Next, I'm going to discuss changing a matrix question once published. After you're published, you will still be able to make other changes to a matrix question, like you can add or reword look-fors. You can reword the scale. Be careful though, again, if you've already started capturing data, not to rename to a completely different concept, or you can enable and disable an A. Once published, you will not be able to change the point value of the scale. If you need to do this, you will need to clone the original item. You do that by clicking Copy, changing the data label, change the scale, and then you'll want to click Save. Note that editing a matrix question by cloning essentially creates a new question. So you will not be able to combine old and new data if you make this change. If you've already published, you will always be able to reorder items or click any element to edit, delete, or copy. Lastly, as I make changes, you'll notice these yellow dots show me where changes have been made, but not yet published. That means that if an observer currently has the tool open, they will not see the changes you make. It will not update live if a form is actively being completed. Once you hit publish, any observer completing the new form will see the changes reflecting. To view my form as an observer, I would simply assign myself as an observer and view the form as any observer would. Find out more information about assigning observer in our other guides. I hope this was a helpful tour and example of how you can use ClickUp Form Builder. Please feel free to reach out to your CSM or to our support team with questions as you build.